in which the climate change scenario is really not so future after all. Yeah, but later on, maybe I'll, have an opening to talk about that.
Yeah. So I guess I wanted to move on and sort of a little bit sort of talk about the process of writing fiction, because again, sort of you are an academic, you also have sort of other works of fiction that you've written, and I want to talk a little bit about how the process of Ghost differed to sort of your other works of fiction, such as Songs of Silence, Flying with Icarus, and The Permanent Freedom. As it is written in memory of Pete, which again makes it inherently personal. So again, going back to sort of the personal and politics, how they intersect.
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I guess the framing of Ghosts as a family album and as a fictional memoir does provide a kind of intimacy, a particular kind of intimacy that is different from what you find in the other books. But if you're looking at the way I focus on psychological interiority, I don't think it's all that different from the others in terms of being personal. I do think that the larger historical geopolitical factors in terms of post-colonial specificities is a bit more muted, a bit more subtle than in the other books. So, it's the climate change that tends to hit you in the eye kind of thing. And I guess, as the Haitians say, behind that mountain, there are other mountains, so there's a kind of layering in which the climate change aspect of it is what comes, it's full frontal focus, and then you have to weave back to the historical connection. But your larger question about the process of how I wrote the book as opposed to how I have written others. I tend to have, in all my fiction, a kind of philosophical point of view, which probably reveals that I'm totally superstitious, I tend to think not so much that we invent stories, but that we hear and uncover them. There's always a time, I suppose, for an idea. The idea is there, it floats somehow, and different people reach up and catch bits of it, and you never get the full story. So I see myself in a way as listening keenly to uncover bits and pieces of an idea whose time has come, and other people do the same thing. Generally, too, like every writer, I write about my obsessions. And that's why, you'll see similar things coming up in my books over and over again. I was quite startled when somebody said, well, Moshe in A Tall History of Sugar is really the dwarf child at the end of Ghost. And I said, yeah, oh dear, kind of thing. But it's funny because I thought about that in a different way when I was writing that book. But it doesn't mean that I start off thinking I'm going to write about an idea. I start writing something in very different ways. Sometimes it's just a sentence I wake up with in my head. The first sentence of Death, where about Tramadol herself, is and she's Pete's lover. It just came into my head, and that's how that started. Sometimes it might be just an image, it might be just the way somebody smiles or turns their head, or a gesture. It might be just the way the morning feels, after rain, or it might be the idea. But generally speaking, at the same time, I tend to let character, run the story, so I can approach it from any angle. What I can say is that I approach writing short fiction differently from the way I approach writing a novel. I tend to plot the novel more. In the short story, I tend to wait on the story to tell me where it'll end. And by the time I get to the middle of it, I know where it'll end. So it tends to be very tight if it's a long, short story. But structurally, Ghosts kind of, how should I put it now? In a way, I'm being contradictory, but not. Because my first 3 books, Songs of Silence, The Permanent Freedom, and Ghosts, were really kinds of experiments, if you like, around the relationship between short fiction and and um, and the novel. And so I play around a lot with the space between the two genres. And so in Ghost, each chapter, except for the album bookends that Mitch is putting together, can probably be read as each of those stories can be read as a complete self-contained short story. And it's when you put the different stories together that the book as novel emerges, and then it becomes a detective story. I don't know if that answers your question, but, just sort of a general idea. I have this general approach, but also there were these differences. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to go back again to sort of what we were talking about otherworldly spaces. Whether you sort of see an inherent connection to these otherworldly spaces beginning to appear more. Sort of, I think the term is sort of Afro-futuristic spaces and spaces. I think a couple of days ago, Beyonce sort of came out with the Black is King video. And in relation to Ghost, I wanted to talk about sort of whether this is sort of a purposeful twist on conventional stories of grief, and whether the reader is sort of encouraged to look at the present or at the future rather than looking backwards almost. And I kind of say this as a historian as well, where always pushing for people to sort of look at the past as it forms the present, but what about the future? Is that why you sort of use this sort of more Afro-futuristic kind of setting?
That's a very interesting question. I am not terribly comfortable with the term Afro-futuristic. I guess because as far back as I can remember, Caribbean fictions have filtered the historical through myth, and so that leads me to another reflection that because of this, I'm not so sure that writing in that kind of way is appearing more. I suspect that what is happening is that writers are bending the creative strategies of myth in more diverse ways, but I also suspect that we're getting better at reading the fictions from the past because of exposure over time and because of our constantly revisiting what was there before. And I sort of just, I'll come to Ghost in a minute, but I just jump into something like, say, Earl Lovelace's The Wine of Astonishment, written 4 decades ago. And that's really, if you think about it in a particular way, a book about what I call transubstantiation, spirit levitating. Because here are these people, pursuing their Afro religion, and the author just keeps shutting them down, and it seems as though they've lost heart. And then the spirit is in the church, which was prophetic, which was we might call otherworldly, which is also a word that I have trouble with. But I understand the struggle of that word. It's a word like magic realism and marvelous realism and speculative fiction that we struggle to find a way to talk about, or people reading struggle to find a way to talk about our reaching for a language that, how shall I put it now, that seeks to represent or explain the unspeakable things that have happened to us and the unspeakable ways in which we have had to be creative about dealing with those. But just it's interesting to me that the spirit in the church, and they've locked the church, levitates into the carnival, and you could frame that, in some people might say it's Afrofuturistic, I don't know, but I'm hesitant about this idea that we weren't as writing like that. I think almost inevitably, I'm going a long way to come back to books, be patient with me. We write in such ways because we come to grips with a number of facts. One, our ancestors were dislocated from homelands, and whether they come from Africa or Asia, China, India, the Middle East, where, you know, that dislocation that was so violent that they, in one way or another, they carried with them what I call spiritual luggage. That was going to be provender for the, you know, the space they're going to find themselves in. And I say luggage, not baggage, because it was going to be provender. And we have inherited that, you know, and the ways of looking at that. So our beginnings were not only larger than life, meaning unprecedented, incredible, they were full of absences and gaps. And so, you know, it's like a phantom limb that is real but not there. And I think so we reach, you know, that reach of imagination is to deal with those. And then, you know, the fact of the matter is that no matter what we say, nobody, including white people, has recovered from that beginning of modernity in these unspeakably human pasts, where, you know, that unspeakably human past, which people became commodity and capital became king. And we're wrestling with that. And so we are quite capable of predicting the future, you know, because it's always here with us. We're always inhabiting it. So I think when we write historical fiction, I think it would be interesting to revisit a lot of Caribbean historical fictions and see the ways in which what people call Afro-futuristic, either Indio-futuristic might come up now, or Sino-futuristic, you know, writing about history as all these things, you know, haunting, as a haunting of spirits, you know, a project of imagination that fills in gaps, you know, an inhabitation of psychic space, which, you know, travels between the future, past, and present, becoming a way meaningless in that way because we're making sense of this kind of thing. And you know, as far as ghosts is concerned, I set the book in the near technological future because the catastrophe of climate change describes where we're clearly heading. And a lot of research about the science of it went into that. You know, it's another apogee, if you like, of the human as commodity and capital as king. Some people just refuse to accept that what they're doing to make money, you know, it's natural, but it isn't. You know, so I think that that sense that what is happening now and that future that we're, as we speak, inhabiting, you know, is linked to the past. You always have to take this backward glance, as Lamming put it, to the past. It is not really, in a way, a backward glance that is to a past that is cut off from us. We are living it, you know, we are using the luggage, you know, and we're, you know, fighting the baggage. So I think, yeah, so no, there was no anything. I wasn't making any prophecy, you know. I mean, you know, when I wrote that, we are just saying this is, you know, it's upon us.
Yeah,
it's upon us.
You're sort of used to the term, sort of, luggage rather than baggage. I think we'll take sort of a small interval and hear a reading from yourself. Before we sort of proceed to the next.
Okay. You know, I had thought I would read for 5 minutes from the beginning of the book, but I've talked so long, I'm tired of hearing myself. So I am going to, you know, sort of jump right in the middle and read, and I'm taking a risk. You know, I don't like to read what I have different from what I said I'm going to read, but I think I'm going to do this. This is, the story is told for my listeners by 4 sisters who each have a different perspective on the death of the brother, but all of them are wrestling with, you know, to come to terms with it in different ways and feeling that they've been implicated somehow. And but there's one sister who tends to be a bit different, and she's the one who speaks in Creole. So I think I'm going to read her narrative. It's short, and she sort of slipped it in there before Mitch, the writer, put the album together. I think I'll read it both for the shift in sound, hearing my own voice too much, but also because she does quite a bit of reflection on the process of writing as opposed to speaking. I hope it works. My listeners, if it doesn't work, forgive me. I think I'll do better in the second reading. Okay. I am the one who wasn't expected to write anything because I am not a book person. Plus, Mitch is not the kind of person who you can trust not to go in there and interfere with what don't concern her, fixing full stop and comma and all that kind of nonsense. And I don't like people trouble my things when I put them down. I don't like the one Evangeline either, for she too holy, and too love treat the rest of us like we're her children. And it really upsetting to see how she get Mitch to write her part of the story so she would get the most space. For she well and know Mitch cannot stop once she starts. She going right until the page feel pain and cry out for murder. Like she think word can turn flesh and make gunman or duppy flee. She think any story upon earth can finish. But you know, Pete was my brother too, and this is supposed to be a family album for him. So I might as well put in my 2 cents. Mitch don't say anything about me, so let me introduce myself. I am Peaches, number 5 in the family, unless you count Tram, who I think of as more like Peach twin, though she's not our sister, but really our cousin. In which case, I am still not number 6 if you count Pete and Tram as half each. Think of me as the 5th figure in this quadrille, Mitch and them dancing. I come in on this side unexpected. Pass the cut on the left-hand side. No, sir? But I go and keep it short. So Mitch can squeeze me in without cutting and carving and telling more lies so I can fit. As I was saying, I am Peaches, otherwise called Cynthia, my right name. The rough and tough one who dress in big boots and work on construction site like man. I never run after school like the rest. In that way, I suppose you could say I am just like Trump. Big laugh, oi. I associate in construction, and that was enough for me. I like being outside making things, sensible things like houses that people can live in, not pretty things for people to just look on and read. I have 7 children, 1 less than my mother, and I bring them up under one roof, but not with their father. He live by himself and I live by myself. But to bring money in your house is pure sin, shame, and disgrace. But I have no quarrel with him otherwise. He's a good father to his children. Yes, Pete is. The one who like to go to court to watch proceedings even when they don't concern me. My sisters and brothers laugh and find it funny. I have enough blue boots to climb 11 steps. But there's a lot of things I learned from watching proceedings in court. The strangest things happen there. What people bring and how people lie is unbelievable. Up to recently, I see a rape case thrown out of court because the supposed victim married to the raper the very next day after the rape supposed to take place. And a man bring up a man for thieving him banana 5 days after him born, he was going to thief it. And the man should have thief it same day as the warning. So the man wouldn't have to catch him unawares. I see how those people bold and brave and bold-faced to bring foolishness to judge. And so I was never afraid to talk out in court. I learned from every idiot. I feel bad over how Pete died. Yes. But I don't feel guilty like the rest of them saying. I do what I have to do for Pete. I was the one stand up in court and tell the judge the truth. That Yvette deliberately make herself an unreliable witness by changing her story over and over, so they wouldn't call her to give evidence. I stand up and tell the court that Mariam lying to her mash up teeth. I tell them the police take bribe to hide the murder weapon that all of a sudden so nobody can find. I tell you the rotted truth. If I did have money, I sue every blasted one of them in civil court. The government, the police, Yvette, Mariam. This wicked country where murderation is dime a dozen because nobody in charge don't care. For they get paid to damn corrupt. I never agree with Evangeline or the lawyers who advise us to let it go because of shortage of evidence and how we couldn't force Yvette to testify. Me, I would have forced her. She would know what hit her. I don't shame or feel guilty. It's only because I didn't have the money. They could have a system where you can appeal against an acquittal, same as though you can appeal against a conviction. The other thing is how everybody going on like Pete was a saint. That's why I don't like eulogy, you know. I don't want any of that at my funeral, you hear? Pete wasn't no saint. He was flesh and blood same way and have some dirty ways just like the rest of us. And the only dream I dream see him after him dead is when I see him dressed up neat in burying clothes working behind a fence, looking sober and serious. like a man who sit down and think about what he's doing with himself for the first time. I said to him, "Hi, Pete," and he greet me back. And I said, "How things over there?" And he said, "Things not bad, but you know, if I did take advice, I would be over there where you are now." What you say? No, not to me. It's just that I feel like cutting a whole set of bad words because I can't stop this eye water from making me fall down. That's.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful
Word.
Thank you.
But she's a very different one from the rest of them, you know, and she's the only one who speaks in Creole actually in that way in the whole book. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So going back to questions, I wanted to touch upon how you frame the Caribbean experience both creatively and critically, and how you use various paradigms and how they sort of intersect and weave together. Like many other Caribbean writers, such as sort of Patricia Powell, you kind of approach it in a very interesting way. So I'd like to hear a bit more about sort of your creative process and your critical thinking process.
I think what probably links my creative and my critical process is a particular way of seeing the Caribbean. To put it in a nutshell, we are what I call a mix-up society. You know, some people use nice words like creolization and hybridization and so on, but I like mix-up. So we never go in straight lines. We go crab and wise. We go aslant. We like to inhabit spaces between and see we like, you know, the idea of pretty patchy, which doesn't mean bits and pieces that don't fit, but you know, we create things out of what is torn. I think we have a sense of doubleness, and we tend to see things in many sides, like a polygon rather than two sides, you know. And we see the occult undersides of things. Something is always itself and other. And I think our sense of irony is very highly developed, in fact, seeing those other sides. I think that comes out in the writing, and actually how I theorize the Caribbean probably comes out in the fact that I don't write in straight lines. And I don't think any of us do really. I think it's probably not possible when you come from the Caribbean to do that. We're always very, very aware of nuances and shadows and in between, and the fact that you can actually add 2 and 2 and make 5. That's what I would say in a nutshell. Yeah.
I wanted to draw upon a theme that I think, in light of, I guess, the novel circumstances we're in today and just sort of internationally, grief and guilt, and how you think sort of these emotions or feelings can be used to reflect upon personal situations. And I guess the way this is encompassed in Ghost, different perspectives from the sisters, but also I want to touch on Tram as well. We don't hear much from her, but we hear what everyone else has to say about her. The struggle to accept the late Pete's death. So again, a number of things to cover, but particularly sort of, grief, guilt, trauma,
I'm not sure if I understand the question, but I'll sort of respond to, you know, aspects of it that speak to me. The idea of grief and guilt, and how that is expressed, how that might touch a reader. Yeah, okay. the thing is that I guess the aim of fiction is always to write, in such a way that about something that didn't happen, about people who didn't exist. It's write in such a way that the reader recognizes something of himself or herself, and you say, yes, yes, that's exactly how it is. That's how it was. Is a response, I guess, every writer hopes for from each reader. And with the material context, the type of society, the time and place may be new, but that sense of recognition of the book connects that, the place, the emotion, the experience can feel very familiar. And I'm aiming for that, which is just the way of saying that I'm aiming for language that illuminates, regardless of whether I'm writing about grief or elections or Donald Trump or my neighbor's dog that bit me this morning, which he didn't. And of course, at the same time, I don't want complacency. I think I'm a combative writer in that way. I want to disturb and disrupt and provoke ways of thinking. In Ghost, I'm addressing a very intimate personal experience, and we've already talked about the ways in which there's this political aspect to it. The thing about grief that has interested me and I explore in the book is this idea of guilt, and when somebody dies or something like that, and when you look in the psychology books, you get 5 stages: denial, anger, I think, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Grief doesn't tend to come up as guilt doesn't tend to come up as one of the major 5 stages, so it may be there across the stages. And I'm thinking that this association of somebody's death with guilt might be just a Jamaican thing. People make nasty comments all the time at funerals. She's just throwing herself down in the grave and going on bad because she knew she didn't treat him well while he was alive. And it seems odd that people would say something like that when somebody's exposing themselves so nakedly, because they're throwing down, boy, Leslie gone, and throw me in the grave with him, kind of thing. Or maybe a Caribbean thing, because people say, I think about the Haitian ceremony of souls in Haitian Voodoo, where you bring the dead back to a colloquium with the living for confession and forgiveness. And if you're talking about confession and forgiveness, you're talking about guilt immediately. But it seems to me that that is something that is kind of a possibly cultural DNA. And so the writing for me was to find a language that was authentic to that experience of grief, including guilt, in a specific, intimate, familial way. But I really hope that if it was written in a way that was so true to that human experience, that anyone anywhere who had been through such an experience or could imagine such an experience, would say, yes, this is how it was. If it I don't know if such a process, for example, is therapeutic or simply a process of recognition. But I don't know if I've answered your question at all. Yeah, but you can follow up with another one. Yeah.
So I guess this kind of leads me to sort of the question of technology and technological advancement. So again, another sort of 2-part question. How do you, I guess, personally feel about technological advancement, and did you sort of intend for the reader to sort of, in many ways, again, following up to my last question, take away from sort of those, for them to take away, what is for a better word, take away sort of lessons, life lessons of sort of shoulda, woulda, coulda, again, going back to past, present, future, what we can take away from these experiences, how technological advancement has sort of driven us forward, but we're still kind of backwards, but we're present. So I don't know if that...
You mean like we're present in the sense that we are accountable for our use of it?
Yes, yes.
Um, Technology is, I think of technology as whatever we do to deal with certain needs and wants or desires, and that new needs and wants are created by technologies we use. Um, Advancement is again a hard word for me. You have to forgive me, I'm a writer, so words neglect my brain in different ways. Um, so I guess I'm saying I don't think so much in terms of advancement as a technology that meets the need of the hour, and then that works. But it always comes at least two-sided, probably many more sided than that. Um, it really struck me that we were republishing Ghosts at a time when we're dealing with COVID-19, because that whole issue comes up again, you know. It's not that COVID-19 is man-made, despite the theories of the conspiracy theories, but certainly we are addressing the issue of, you know, technologies to deal with it. And the climate change scenario in the book is sort of, you know, parallel in that way. But it really depends on what you do with it, because yeah, it is, isn't it? It's really what you do with it. It's as dangerous as it is important, and that too is just a truism. I'm not saying anything really terribly different or new here. You know, the technology of what do you used to call that thing? You know, I'm losing words, where you use science to prove that women and Black people have smaller brains and therefore are are less. Are you hearing me? Yeah. Yeah. Eugenics, right? Eugenics, right? Yeah. So there it is. You know, we're thinking about the ways in which social media, for example, has helped to give traction to the Black Lives Matter movement. And certainly when people are saying, you know, oh, the Black people weren't just exaggerating, it was really happening, which for many of them is really just it was just a kind of false innocence. Yeah, but we, you know, but it's the same social media that is being used to spread all sorts of disinformation that has proved very, very destructive, even in terms of the COVID-19 situation, how we handle it. So yeah, that's what it is. It's just as good as how we shape it. You know, it's a very political thing. The narrative of technology has to be seen as narrative and practice that is hugely, hugely consequential and hugely political. Yeah. And I don't like to think of it in terms of lessons. I just think it's just there, you know, it is a fact. Yeah.
So I wanted to open up the opportunity for the attendees to ask questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, please pop your question in the chat box, and we'll get Curdella for you. I have a question to sort of kick things off. I was wondering who your favorite character was from Ghosts. I know for me, I really resonated with Tram. Her defiance, sort of just her sense of self, her being, her free spirit. It really resonated to me, but I'm always interested to hear sort of who was your favorite character to write. Yeah.
I confess that I'm in love with Evangeline. I love Evangeline, or Evangeline, depending on how you want to call her. She, because for me, she isn't simply that she holds the family together in terms of both really holding them together, but also she becomes a kind of focal point around which everybody works out, their response to the situation, or declares their response to the situation. But I like her because she traverses different kinds of worlds. She's this one born on an aeroplane, so and she raises the issue of belonging that the bookend starts with, the first bookend starts with, in a much more complex way. Where do you belong? What is your nationality? That kind of thing. And a large part of this is a search for who belongs with whom, kind of thing. I like her because she's a bit of a seer. She reminds me of the old time Jamaican Warner women. And she reminds me very much of somebody I once knew in that description where she comes to the to the airport, with the thing with like a pope's hat, and she's got all these medals from Sojourner Truth to Marcus Garvey to wherever, I know somebody like that, kind of thing. So, and but not just one person, but people who have these various, so she snippets of Jamaica in them. And I like her because she's able to traverse that world and also to carry that with her into deep rural Jamaica, as well as to different cities, across the diaspora and beyond. And I just like her because she's funny. I find her funny. Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions here. One from Lauren Carlin. Thank you for your question. She says, we're seeing such a surge of visibility of work by Caribbean writers. How do you think Caribbean writing as a genre speaks to our current moments?
That's a wonderful question. I think they do in a lot of ways. And when you look at some of the books that have been gaining a lot of attention now, and you realize that, again, they're dealing with situations rooted in old historical, happenings and concerns. It's like, and yet each of them is fresh and new because those are dealing with it in terms of the situation on the ground in various spaces now. And I've heard a lot of interesting comments on what is happening. I'm thinking of what Marlon James said, about, writing in a way that he calls post-colonial, where he says that the focal point is no longer England in terms of who we are wrestling with, but, and relating, but the USA, and he's seeing the old rural narratives, if you like, as sort of no longer relevant. And I'm not knocking him for that view, but it was interesting that for me his most fascinating book is the Book of Night Women, which is a slave plantation, but interpreting that into these times. And of course, Brief History of Seven Killings is and I'm putting it with another book that fascinates me, and that is Roland Watson Grant's Sketcher, which because in the Book of Night, in the Brief History of Seven Killings, you're looking at a Jamaica which is a totally global, space in which, through everything, the violence, the music, everything has become a global point. So it's no longer about the global in the Caribbean so much as the Caribbean in the global, but both of those combined. They're reaching out to what is happening now in a very relevant. And then you get a book like Patsy, Nicole, Dennis Ben's Patsy, which looks at what was really happening to women who came, and they might have been pretty well educated in, became domestic workers and so on. That whole thing, how they got their path to citizenship, looking at the issues of sexuality and same-sex, relationships and difference, which people wrote about from way back in the 30s, but not in that kind of open way because we now have more space to do that. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there. I am now reading Marcia Douglas's the marvelous equations of the dread. What an astonishing book. But I think I think a lot of what is happening, why the Caribbean texts are, getting so much world recognition. It's not, of course, it is fantastic writing, absolutely amazing quality of writing. But I think there's a way in which the Caribbean experience, as represented in these texts, is resonating so much with the experience of a world that is so under siege, and getting more complex and more hybrid and more, when this is quite ironic because it's also getting more polarized. That there's a lot more ways in which people are seeing this as almost a kind of, how shall I put it? Proto is not the word I want, so I won't go there. It's just, sort of symbolic or representative of that kind of shift in the world as well. Yes, I agree with you, Lauren. The marvelous equation of the dread is absolutely fabulous. Sorry, I was just looking at, yeah, yes, thank you for that, John Robert. I saw that, because I was going to compare what Kai Miller says, where he says the Caribbean for him is the center, which is at the shift, completely opposite of what Marlon is saying. And of course, I think, it is just, in terms of what Marlon says, it's also what I might call Caribbean contradiction and doubleness, because the Caribbean is the center for Marlon, in the actual writing. That commitment that Kai Miller has to, looking at the regional Caribbean and going back to past and interpreting them through the kind of lenses, including theorizations, of the present. I think it's a fabulous work going. I'm terribly excited about what I'm seeing going on. And of course, the thing is that all these people went before us have laid these foundations. Even something like being in us, a lot of us are in the space where our work gets marketed in a different way, and so gets to a larger audience. And then there are other ways of spreading the text that we didn't, say people from a couple of decades ago didn't have. So I think there are all these things and lots of others that I would have to think through that go into the mix, yeah. But it's a very rich and exciting thing that's going on. And in poetry as well, and I have to mention people like Aisha Hutchinson, and they're just doing some great work.
Thank you for such a fantastic answer, and thank you for an equally wonderful question, Lauren. Just one, I'll squeeze in another sort of question.
Yes.
Wary of time. This is from Ifoma.
Fiona.
It's
Hi, Fiona. Yes, sorry.
She says, it's a treat to hear this conversation. Thank you for registering and attending. Her question is, she says, how do you keep going when you're working on a long piece of fiction? Is there a writer or writers you turn to, read a paragraph from their works and are re-inspired by? If so, which writers? And if not, how do you fuel your creativity as you write?
What an amazing question. Thank you for that. I think I have to be very honest with this question. And not that I'm not honest with others, but this is one goes so much to the heart of my process that it's something that I keep very private, but I feel I have to answer it to one writer to another. There are writers who inspire me, as a matter of course. I don't necessarily turn to them when I'm writing a long piece. And I have to say also that when I am writing, I deliberately don't read writers for inspiration. When I finish a piece of fiction and I'm done, I clean house, I throw away all the papers and all the things I've thrown and mashed up the house because it's such an enraging process. And I clean the house from top to bottom, and then I read everything I dared not read, in case they influence me too much. So I really don't. Of course, I have to keep on reading. I teach, you know, I teach writing, I teach literature, so I'm always having to read, but I tend to sort of stay away from the idea of being re-inspired because I want the voice to be mine. Of course, it never is only yours, but it's still mine, if you know what I mean. What I do though in terms of writing a long piece, and I want to use my last book, you know, as a tall history of sugar as my example because it led me to a place where I didn't think I would go. And I always think I have to have, you know, a blocks of time and I'm in a cupboard at least psychologically, and you know I'm locked off and the world is not there and I need this block of time to wind, you know, to get it done. And when I found that I didn't have that time when I was writing A Tall History of Sugar. Believe it or not, I wrote that, and maybe some people who are, you know, writers here will have had it. I just wrote it in 20-minute pieces. You know, I'd get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to plan my classes, and I'd finish planning the class, do grading or whatever, take a breath, and then I would just write for 20 minutes. And because I wrote for 20 minutes, I didn't have this pressure of production. I knew I couldn't do much in 20 minutes, you know? So that's how I wrote it over a 4-year period. Did I read anything over that 4 year by writers who were inspiring over that 4-year period? Yeah, inevitably I did, but I tried to avoid that as much as possible. And it's quite scary, you know, sometimes you read some books, you know, and you swear to God, if you didn't know you'd written this before, you know, somebody would say you plagiarized because you think I've invented this, and that's why you can't talk about invention. It's so great, you know. I really like this, you know. I read it tomorrow morning. I didn't cut and throw it out. My hair is still and said, yes, this is great. And then a couple of years later, you read somebody did that same kind of thing. Oh my God. So yeah. Anyway.
Thank you for that question, Fiona. I guess
Yes.
that is, yeah, I want to wrap up sort of the question segment, sort of give you the floor to sort of give us our final reading.
Okay. All right. I see we're almost out of our time, so I think I can do this very quickly. I'll just read a short piece from my favorite character, Evangeline. And this is from the section called Birth. Yeah. The child born on an aeroplane was difficult from the start, and her whole life was taken as an open. She emerged into the troposphere exactly at 1300 hours, 35 feet above land, 35,000 feet above land. The pilot touched down at Santa Fe. The plane was en route to Jacaranda, Caribbean, emergency landing. At the hospital in Santa Fe, mother and child were pronounced well and came home to Jacaranda aboard the next BA flight with cyber kisses and champagne. It was a lucky but not an easy birth. The mother, finding herself thrust up against the bulkhead next to first class, her legs wide open over the head of the male doctor who was mercifully traveling on the same flight, and who was now peering diligently into her nether regions and urging, push, while passengers chittered, twittered, stood or craned to see, and flight attendants shouted over the intercom, passengers, please, please calm down. We're asking you please to stay in your seats. That is the best way you can assist this woman. Please, please. Don't come forward. She needs air. Everything is going to be fine. We have a doctor attending her now. There is no danger to her or her baby. Please, once again, we're asking you to sit down. They themselves, however, doing plenty of craning and crowding. The mother, I am saying, finding herself thrust up against all this, was so overcome with panic and shame that she, Seraphine, opened her lungs and bawled out a string of bad words, the tone, if not the sense of which was well understood by all. Frightened at the power and vigor of her curses, the flight attendants staggered backwards and began speaking in muffled tones. Some passengers laughed. Others, mainly women, cringed, cursed, threatened, or exhorted the multitude, hiding their children's faces against their thighs. You never see baby born yet. What you carrying on so far? What you gawping at the woman for? You see any excitement here? What you all think? You men don't think you had anything to do with it. A woman in a large turban, flushed with excitable wrath, accused her male companion. But Rita, how I come to have anything to do with it? I don't know the woman. The man exclaimed, timid and exasperated altogether. He made a mistake. Several other women joined the fray and began lambasting him for pretending to be a fool. Push, the doctor urged, encouraging. Push now, hard as you can. It's coming, it's coming. It is said that so prolific, inventive, and X-rated became my mother's curses as the baby said peak that the air in the cabin blushed blue and the flight attendants had to give extra oxygen. In the end, Seraphine simply wept, as she would do again many years thereafter. It was her first child. The baby flew out at the moment Seraphine grabbed the doctor's face and tore it in two, exposing his gums, his teeth, and the cartilage under his nose, so that when they landed, he too had to be rushed to the hospital to be stitched up again, the stitching done imperfectly, so that ever afterwards, when called to any delivery bed, he wore a sinister and feral grin and guarded his face with his hands. The child came out completely encased in the amniotic sac, not a caul over her face, but her entire length, wrapped in jelly like an onion in its netted bag. She was exactly 7 weeks premature, lay easily in the palm of one of her mother's hands, and weighed 3 pounds, 2.5 ounces. Everything on her was perfect. Follow-up care at hospital in Jacaranda found no ill effects or intimations of future trouble from the fact that she had started traveling from before birth and arrived too soon. They called her Evangeline. In the aftermath of giving birth in front of strangers between earth and air, Seraphine remembered only the joy of the child's perfection and forgave her husband John Morris his depredations on her person for which she had cursed him on the plane. She allowed him enough subsequent liberties that even 7 more children were born in the 13 years following their spectacular daughter's eruption into the world. But that belongs to another story. Inevitably, legend affixed to the child, and this was the beginning of her troubles. The first time was when the naive mother, barely 19 years old and unlearned in the politics of belonging, went to register the birth and was told by the Registrar General that she could not, because the child had not certifiably been born in Jacarandan space. No need to go into the details of the controversies that ensued. Suffice it to say that Human Rights Watch took up the case on Seraphine's behalf, and the outcome was that Evangeline Morris became registered as a British citizen, as it was proven by aircraft records that she emerged from between her mother's legs in the minute before the plane left international space, which meant that she belonged to the country of the airline. If she had been born in the airspace over Santa Fe, she would have been an American citizen. It seemed that there was never any probability of her being born Jacarandan, since the aircraft was nowhere near Jacaranda when my sister entered the world. In the end, because John Morris insisted that no child of his was going to be registered a foreigner and it be left there, Evangeline was also made a Jacarandan citizen by descent. This took a long and roundabout time, as first Seraphine had to produce evidence of the child's place of birth. Since this application ran parallel with the British and American investigations, the British birth certificate was not yet issued, and so Seraphine had to use the old-fashioned way of proving such things, which was to get reputable witnesses to certify that the baby had indeed been born in a certain place, in this case, an airplane in flight. This would appear on the Jacarandan birth certificate as place of birth in the air, country of birth unknown. Luckily, the British birth certificate came through first, and the information on it was copied onto the Jacarandan certificate. The Jacarandan document took 7 months to process, from the moment of the child's registration as British to the day she reached 9 months old. That day, the beginning of her 9th month, also registered the first of the omens that enmeshed my sister's life from her birth to the grave. And I'm going to finish now. On the day Evangeline became a dual citizen and attained 9 months old, Seraphine took her for her routine checkup at the obstetrics clinic. She, that is Seraphine, returned very disturbed. When the nurse put the child on the scale to be weighed, Evangeline did not tick the scale and her weight did not register. 6 times the nurse put the child on the scale and her weight did not register. Since from the moment Seraphine and her daughter entered the clinic, people had started craning, whispering, or exclaiming out loud, "Not is aeroplane baby that? Is aeroplane baby that?" And some accosted the mother to praise, admire, deceitful, or prophesy. All eyes were already fixed on Evangeline, and the strange occurrence understandably became a major sign in the eyes of onlookers. Prophecies flew, pronouncements multiplied. A Warner woman wet herself right there on the spot. And it is said that on the nurse's sixth attempt, a patu, an owl, flew in the air and in the broad daylight above the clinic. In a rage, Seraphine took her child and fled the clinic, cursing as she had done at the birth, and swore never again to do. And swore never again to do, for she did not like to think that this spirit of Rita possessed her child. It happened that, for unknown reasons, apart from the Jacaranda and Warner woman, an American psychic was present in the clinic when this event took place, and so was a local newspaper reporter on a particularly dry day for news, on the prowl for a scoop. He had been sent out by his editors to find something to lead the next day's edition. So it was that my sister appeared again in the news, reappearing yet again 7 years later in cyberspace via YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, when another child burst out on a plane, and my sister's pioneering journey as the first one was recalled. Seraphine saw her daughter spread out in all the local media by tributary via the newspaperman's scoop, and in the American Journal of Psychics via the Tourist Psychics article, in which she testified to having seen an intense agglomeration of energy particles surrounding my sister at the moment the nurse lifted her towards the scale. This burst of energy, the psychic said, intensified to the nth degree until there was a flash of white light as the child floated out of gravity, as though intervening arms had lifted her away from Earth, neutralizing the nurse's mass. The child lay in a sack of white light and could not be touched by anything attached to land or solid matter. As the Jacarandan woman translated later, the child levered. Maybe that is why the literature travels, because we are levered. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for that wonderful reading. Unfortunately, we are actually out of time. I wished we could stay longer and chat longer. Thank you so much, Curdella. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your fantastic readings. Thank you to all our attendees. Thank you for registering. Thank you for your lovely questions. For anyone who missed any aspect of the conversation, it will be up on our YouTube channel for you to view. And from the Peepal Tree family and myself, take care, travel safe. The link for Ghosts will be sort of live on our socials. It's available on ebook at Amazon, and the paperback, is available on our website. Thank you all again. Take care, and thank you very much, Curdella. I really look forward to reading A Tall History of Sugar. Thank you again all.
Thank you all very much, and thank you for all who sent notes to me on the chat. I'll shoot you an email when I can, and bless you all. Thank you so much for coming and being so patient with my meanderings. Thanks to Peepal Tree for doing this, Rowan. Thank you very much. You know, I really appreciate it, and for all your just communications all the time. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Tanya. Oh, Camille. Mackenzie, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye, Kathy. Thank you. Hi, Hannah. Thank you. Yeah, bye-bye. Just saw you. Okay. Camille is an HR.